Okay, we're live.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the May 9th, 2023 meeting of Mahone Bay Town Council. We have all the members of council, underscore all members of council here in the room tonight. For those of us that have been away, it's nice to be back and see the real faces. Okay. If you are watching from home, it is being recorded at the YouTube of the session, but we don't record Q&As with folks that are at home. So at the end of the meeting, before we go to our in-camera session, the people at home will have an opportunity to ask council questions on any issue that was discussed in the meeting tonight. So have your pencil and paper ready at home to mark your questions down. And when we conclude the agenda for the meeting, we will take some time to answer those questions. And we'll begin by acknowledging that we are gathered tonight in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral, present, and future territory of the Mi'kmaq people. Tonight we gather with the intent followed by the living peace and friendship treaties, and we do so with respect, cooperation, and coexistence. Council, we'll call you to order. You have an agenda that was emailed to you. What is your wish? Councillor Carver?
Your worship, I would like to add a new item, an item under new business, which is about the Climate and Environment Summit that's being planned.
Okay,
And with that amendment, I would move that the agenda be approved as amendment.
seconded, moved and seconded to approve the agenda as amended. On the question, all in favor? Motion's carried. Let's go to the minutes of the regular meeting of April the 27th. What is your wish?
Mayor, they look in good order. I move that we accept them as presented.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Now. You've heard the motion and the seconding. On the question, all in favor? That motion is carried. Let's go to the special council meeting of April 28th. Councillor Carver?
Move that the minutes of the special council meeting of April 28th be accepted as circulated.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Lawrence Croft. On the motion. All in favor? Motion is carried again. And now, drum roll. Our fire chief, Adam Eakins, is going to give his quarterly report. A burning report, it always is.
Yeah, I guess everyone got a copy of it, and I guess really the biggest item in there is the fact the new pumper truck is ordered and finalized, and it's just sort of in the process of being built now, or parts of it at least. Yeah, that's about all, really.
And for the good news, when do we expect delivery?
Oh, sometime December 2024, I believe.
December of
Wow,
2024. Yeah.
They're over like a 22, 23 month build time.
What are the barriers of entry to get into that business?
I'd say a few $1 million.
Okay,
I don't know if anyone's got any questions.
Councillor Owens Croft, please.
Just out of curiosity, it's public work season. How are the speed bumps working? They're on both sides. You can't avoid them coming out of the station, and is it
No.
slowing down?
They definitely slow the trucks down. I'm not entirely sure. We've had some issues with some of the trucks, whether some of it is related to maybe going over them speed bumps. had quite a lot of things come loose on the trucks recently.
Mhm.
And whether you can attribute it to that or just the potholes around, I don't know.
Mhm. Response time from the.
Response time, you've pretty much gotta slow down to about 10 kilometers an hour in the fire truck to go over them speed bumps. Um,
Plus members getting to the station.
yeah, I don't know how
Mhm.
fast
Okay.
people are driving over them. The speed bumps on Pleasant Street, I know they were a slightly different design on those, the truck would ride over the speed bumps, sort of straddle them. It doesn't really work. It seems one wheel still hits it, and also the placement. Some of them are pretty close to the sidewalk, so you can't actually get over to that side because you run the risk of scraping the trucks down the power poles or something. There's one coming down Claremont. You could run the one half of the truck sort of on the edge of the speed bump, but there's a sign on the power pole, scrape the truck.
Really?
Yeah.
Speed humps are fairly common in North America, and are you hearing anything on the firefighters' net from other departments as to?
Not that I'm aware of. I'm sure there'd probably be something out there if you went digging around looking for it, but
Okay,
yeah, I don't know. I think they must slow down other road users as well, which is probably what they were intended for, so.
yeah. Councillor Carter.
Thank you. Thanks for the report. Councillor Lawrence Croft asked about response time, and I was also curious about response time. I understand that some jurisdictions track the response time to various episodes, and I wonder if our department does that.
We do have a log of when we were called, when we acknowledged the call and when the first truck leaves the station, arrives on the scene.
So all of that data. is-
All of that is, we have all that, yeah.
So if we were curious, we could.
Yeah, it's something we're sort of in the process of still trying to work out the best way for us to track it and then be able to
Okay.
produce something at the end of it.
Yeah.
It's not quite as easy as it
I
may seem.
imagine,
It
yeah.
probably is to someone who's good with spreadsheets and on the computer, but I'm not. So,
Mhm. So it's being fine tuned.
yeah, we're sort of in the works. We have one member who is good with spreadsheets, and hopefully we'll have something in the future.
Thanks, Adam.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? No? Thank you, Chief, for
That's
the
Chief.
report, as
You're
always.
welcome, and like I say, anytime, feel free to give us a call if you've got any questions.
And we do appreciate the efforts of you and your members to keep the town safe.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Adam.
Do they have that software that we saw when we visited other fire stations where they record all the member information, training
We have the
information?
ability to I am responding.
Yeah. So can they track those things like how long it takes the members to get?
You gotta
to the
get set up
fire
and stuff like that, yeah. Well, it doesn't track how long it takes us to get to the fire hall, no.
hall?
It tracks the response times for the vehicles.
No, once it goes out the door, till it engages.
And we keep track of that as on our paperwork anyway, as to what time the page comes in, what time we acknowledge it, what time what time the vehicles leave, and what time they arrive on scene, and then what time they clear the scene, what time they come back. That's all got track of.
Thank you. Councillor Ormscroft.
Yes. Do they have GPS on the trucks?
Not per se, no. We are
That
getting a
tracks
system,
are
we are
being
getting a
used.
system in whereby we get a call through I am responding, it can actually pick out where the call is and show us where it is at.
Okay.
Hmm.
And the trucks are, you know, with an iPad, you can have GPS, you can,
Yes.
like, it is, all the equipment is there.
Okay. That may be a way of
The
being able
capabilities
to
there.
keep some records too. But maybe wondering if a volunteer could, who is, can input that kind of stuff on a volunteer basis into it's not real confidential information that would have to go on a spreadsheet.
No, there is a lot of stuff out there through I Am Responding,
Mhm.
and, you know, once we get everything geared up the way we'd like to have it geared up, you know, if we have another department coming in, if they have it geared up for their GPS and stuff on their vehicles, like we have Lunenburg coming in, we could actually go on the iPads in the vehicle and say, okay, here's where they are,
Oh, okay.
that type of thing.
Great stuff.
But
Okay,
it's a matter of getting it all set up.
thank you, Counselor Now. Let's go to correspondence 4.1. A letter from Autism Nova Scotia concerning a sponsorship request for Walk Your Way.
Mayor, as the sponsorship request doesn't follow the guidelines of our grants policy, unfortunately. I'd move that council direct staff to make a posting either through the mayor's newsletter or perhaps on our Facebook site to acknowledge that June 3rd, 2023 is the Walk Your Way for Autism Nova Scotia event. And I'll leave it at that. That's the motion.
I'll second it.
Seconded. You heard the motion. On the question. All in favor? Motion's carried. Next item is correspondence information.
Mayor, on correspondence item 5.1, I'd move that we receive and file the correspondence, noting that I'm sure council and staff has read it.
Seconded, moved and seconded. On the question. All in favor? That motion's carried. Let's go to staff reports. Sorry, Deputy Mayor.
Just to note that the bylaw is still being discussed at policy and strategy, I believe.
Yes. It is.
Yeah, yes, yeah.
For folks who
Yeah.
might be wondering.
Yeah,
30th, right?
yeah. Okay. Thank you. Let's go to staff reports. The first one is the staff report, the council, the CAO will respond to.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If anyone has any questions, it's just a short report to just the assignments from council this time. Oh, and I should note, we missed the most recent budget meeting. There were a couple of directions just to amend the draft budget. So we'll put those in and then we'll show that they're complete by the time they're in there. You'll have already received that.
Councillor Carr.
Thank you. I have a question about number 17, the reconciliation crosswalk. I think we had asked to have council asked to have some feedback about the discussions with the First Nations in terms of the design and so on. So
Yeah, so essentially we wrote and let the representatives of the Acadia band, we have 3 contacts there, know. And I just wrote them all. Maureen used to handle most of that, so I wasn't totally sure who was responsible for what. But they did get back to us right away and just had a little bit of, you know, so what's the basis of the design? And so our contractor, our normal painting contractor, who is likely to be the only bidder on this year's painting contract, did a crosswalk at Dow, a similar, I think they're called Seven Feathers, we've been calling it Truth and Reconciliation, but I think the alternate name is the Seven Feathers crosswalks. I'm not sure which one is preferred. So, and thankfully the representatives of the band, or the one who got back to me in Teal, mentioned that they were familiar with that and thought that worked out very well, that the job was quite good. So that's a good vote of confidence as far as the design. And the only distinction here is the spacing between the feathers is dependent on the width of the crossing. So it's always the same dimensions between the 2 white lines, but the spacing of the stencil, the stencil's the same, but the spacing of the 7 of them should be like equal. So depending on how wide the crossing is, then there's more space between them. All the negative space is orange and the feathers are white. So that's what, that we've got their blessing, and there's also an encouragement to, you know, I said probably will acknowledge when it's open. And so there was an interest in being made aware of the timing, so that if we're doing anything, that there might be someone who'd like to attend from the band for that. So we'll find out from the contractor what the timing will be.
If I may just follow up.
Supplement?
When we have seen the photograph or the image that was sent to us with the original request, I was concerned because there was so much paint, painted surface in the design that was shown, and I think I said that I have this fear of slipping on painted concrete, because I have. So I was concerned about that. And now that you've said that the negative space will be orange paint.
So it is entirely painted.
Hmm?
It is entirely painted.
The whole thing is
Yeah.
painted as this distinct, as differentiated from current crosswalks, which have a white stripe and air concrete.
Yeah.
And so,
So the paint will be road treated paint, so it will meet all the requirements, but obviously. Totally painted surface versus some unpainted surface, if you're watching your footing, you can't avoid the paint, and you know, even treated paint may be more slippery than asphalt, yeah.
I'll walk beside it. Thank you.
I have another question from another.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, number one, with the housing, with modal. Is there, I'm just curious because this must have been before my time. Is it
Which item is it on
number one?
Okay.
Number one, and collaboration with modal, with Howard, with
Yeah.
housing. Do we have any parcels of land we have in mind, or is this just something that you're discussing?
Yeah, my understanding of this motion, and yes, it was a long time ago, was just in terms of like kind of sharing what the practices that we were looking at in our drafts were. And then, you know, if modal had other approaches to affordable housing that we could try to coordinate, but it wasn't about any type of particular property or anything. It was just, you know, how are we orienting our new draft bylaws towards housing, and you know, is there anything we can learn about what modal is doing that would coordinate? So I know the motion says collaboration, but it's only in the context of the preparation of the planning document.
Okay, I thought it was sort of like a partnership that we would possibly cost share on, where there's land surrounding Mahone Bay that we could almost like annex or share with them with affordable
I think
housing.
probably if there is an interest in, because I wouldn't say we could do that through the planning process, but what we could do that through is the housing strategy development process. So that may present an opportunity to actively collaborate on a project. So council might make a similar motion to this about reaching out. We have, I guess I should say, as far as the housing strategy, on a number of occasions, reached out to the other municipalities in the county about a coordinated approach. And we've all had the same, you know, well, let's wait and see what the province gives us through the needs assessment process. But I will say the staff got together a couple times, talk about opportunities for a joint strategy. And I think there was some maybe reticence from some of the units in developing a local strategy. So if they are focused on maybe a particular project, but they didn't want to do the strategy development. So it may be that if it looks like we're approaching it on our own, we might take another stab at saying we're doing it. And if modal would have an interest in looking at what we're possibly doing and collaborating on that, if they're not interested in sort of putting pen to paper as a strategy development,
Right.
there may be looking just at targeted opportunities.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think there probably is an opportunity upcoming for the type of thing you're talking about, but it would be the housing strategy.
Great, and can I have?
Deputy Mayor is next, Councillor Terry. Sorry, did you have another?
I did
question?
have I just wanted to update you on number 34. With the art show with Rebecca Fisk. And I am in contact with someone from Community Culture and Heritage who thinks we will be able, we fall into the grant. And the deadline is June 15th for application, and Kelly has agreed that I can act as a liaison on her behalf and try and get this grant for that art show to take place. So I am, I've got papers from this person. I've had conversation with her already, so.
If I could just quickly
Yes,
comment on
please.
that. So just so the council's aware, obviously this motion was to include it in the draft budget. And I think everyone is quite accepting of it being included in the budget,
Mm-hmm.
but we are gonna talk about grants on Thursday at the Thursday's budget meeting. So that'll give a chance to just make sure the councils confirm the grant allocations. We haven't actually formally notified the center. And they had to
Yeah.
submit an application to Community Culture and Heritage. So just in terms of the process for staff we don't feel have the authorization to notify the center yet, but council could on Thursday say, we're good to go on the grants allocations in the budget, and we don't mind anyone, letting them know, because there's several other grants that people are actively waiting to hear about. So I just wanted to, because if you're talking to the center, they're like, well, we haven't received.
No, I'm
anything
not
back.
talking to anyone. I'm
That's
only
why.
talking with, just seeing if we would be eligible and fall into the criteria that they're looking for. And it's in the, it's called the Interest in Our Future Diversity Community Capacity Fund. So it's they all have dates several times throughout the year, and the next one is June 15th, which would allow us for a September showing.
Deputy Mayor, please.
So just I wanted to clarify one thing that came out of the questions you're asking around housing. The housing strategy development you mentioned, was it residents, but the staff who are not very comfortable about developing a strategy, or was it council?
Staff are just sharing where they think their units are gonna come down in terms of, so. If we get the needs assessment, then I think some of the councils might talk about next steps that they haven't really, this council had already decided on the steps before. And frankly, the needs assessment process has been a holdup for us.
Yeah.
But in some of the other cases, I just don't think they've got the council, hasn't really necessarily talked. I'm not sure it represents an absolute reticence, more of like hasn't decided what to do.
Yeah, well, I'm asking because that gives me sort of food for thought around Shark and my role and what role to play in that. The other question I had was number 8. It talks about us the meeting scheduled for May 19th, and I believe at the last budget meeting we actually scrapped that meeting. And so
I wondered if anyone would bring this up, so that's the last piece of information that we had, was that's what it was scheduled for. This was a long time ago, and I noted council may need to reschedule to accommodate budget meeting schedule, so I'm glad you brought it up.
Yes.
I'll happily put another date in there, maybe councillors even, it's appropriate pursuant to this item on the agenda to talk about the fate of that planned meeting, or we'll talk about it some other way before the next one, but yeah, that's, I highlighted it in yellow, but it's not done. It's highlighted to say, I actually don't know what we're gonna do now, because I do believe we
Is
talked
that
about.
budget meeting not on the 18th though? Did we not schedule that for Thursday instead of Friday?
So I had suggested having a budget meeting in place of the special meeting on the 19th, which was going to be this RCMP conversation, and then it was pointed out that some members might not be available, so we looked at the 18th, but we were looking at the 18th for budget, not so even if we do meet on the 18th, which I assume we'll confirm on Thursday, that would still not be for this, so we still don't have a date for this meeting anymore.
So
Okay.
Unless we go ahead on the 19th with a limited number of councilors, I guess that's the other option, but I'm not sure that's what everybody wanted, so.
Okay.
no, in my mind, we scrapped that meeting on the 19th. We agreed that you're taking it off the calendar and something else.
So you wouldn't be available anyway, and you're the one who requested this meeting, so
Yeah.
probably we shouldn't have it without you.
Yeah, so I would suggest maybe the special meeting in June, if you don't have an agenda for that time.
The only thing with the special meeting in June is, that is the week I will be on vacation. So I will.
Always try.
It's all good.
Deputy Mayor on
I
that.
timed it not to be a regular council meeting week, happens to be the special
Council.
Sorry, just one point. So I did see the NSFM posted that they're going to be having a roundtable discussing the new RCP contract, specifically around the retroactive pay. And what all the municipal bills would be. And I think it would probably be wise for us to at least wait to understand what that incremental payment looks like. I think it's going to be substantial
Yes.
from the way it sounds, like hundreds of thousands of dollars, even for our town. So it would probably, it might help improve, it might help influence our conversation or impact the conversation. We had that understanding, and I don't know, CAO, when that discussion is gonna happen, but I get the impression it's happening sometime in the next, 2 months.
Yeah, I was thinking back, because when you said there was a time, but I'm not sure there is. It just says NSFM is following this matter, so there might be a time, but I don't know there is one yet, so I don't know.
They say, well, they give us and take it away.
Yeah, often with the same
Yeah,
hand.
exactly.
Councillor Carver.
So I'm still in line for after the deputy mayor, but I also just want to comment on the timing issue. Because we have a whole bunch of times kind of on hold for the doodle poll that the clerk had circulated. So if any of those are extra after the governance training is scheduled, perhaps we could.
I don't think that's going to be an option.
You don't have that.
I'm still waiting to hear from one day at a time.
I thought that was really.
It's a good thought.
There's available dates.
Okay.
We don't know what council wants to tend to do. I'm sure by that time, something else will have come up.
I'm still in line.
Or we just
You're
wait
still in line.
until
When,
we have
okay,
more information.
back to you. Sir.
Yeah, so can we move it to July then? Tentatively now, rather than saying we're putting it on May 9th. And change that will not be meeting.
I think it's a good idea. If somebody wanted to make a motion, then this one can come off and we'll put a new one on the list that says.
So
Second.
Moved and seconded, and we're canceling the meeting on the RCMP currently scheduled for the 19th of May, and we're gonna, a date to be determined in July,
21st.
July
21st?
Yeah.
21st in July.
Had an open day on the first.
Not
Sure.
Take care of that.
Somebody gave you that day off. I don't know.
I don't have a question, but I have a remark about that. Is that, how many times did we hear at the conference last week? How we're paying the bill, but the feds in the province are the only ones at the negotiating table.
Decisions.
And we heard that theme over and over and over again last week at the conference. People are not happy. And I think we're going to see some real changes in people dropping out of the RCMP agreement. Coming down.
Across the country, yeah.
Well,
We're in a different situation where the province has put themselves between us and the RCMP. And if they want to absorb this cost, they could, and if they don't, then it's really gonna cause some questioning about the whole.
We're paying
What's the money in our hands?
we're paying 70% of it, the other 30%
Hmm.
paid by the federal government.
Yeah, and I think a lot of municipalities, when they see what it would cost to establish their own police force, it's gonna change a lot of minds about the value of the RCMP. We have a motion on the floor. On the question, all in favor? Motion is carried, the meeting is moved to the 21st of July. Deputy Mayor, anything else?
I'm good, thanks.
Just before we leave that, I wanted to make the observation that at the NSFM spring workshop last week, Minister Lohr said that the housing study is that close. Almost ready.
Yeah.
That close.
Yeah.
Again, still. Councillor Garrett.
So this is just following up on Councillor Lonis Cross earlier question about number one, the collaboration with Modal around planning and housing. And that had really come up because it had to do with the fact that the province was requiring municipalities to collaborate on that kind of planning. So that was part of what triggered that. Because
Yeah, and we now have, if I can, I just said, we have a mandatory process now where we notify each other. So at a minimum, they know what we're doing and we know what they're doing. And then in this case, it was basically just that plus,
Yeah.
do you want to have any conversation about this? And obviously, this motion was made way before the draft documents became public, so we weren't gonna share them back when they were still at the steering
Right.
team, but. So now we can, and somewhere in the next 2 months, we'll get a little bit of feedback to, it may not be anything, but hey, thanks for sharing, but yeah. Before we close the current engagement window, we'll have some comment.
Okay. Anything else? Any other questions on the report to council?
Mayor, I'd move that we accept staff report to council for information.
Thank you. Do we have a second or deputy mayor seconds? On the motion, on the question, all in favor? The motion is carried. Thank you, CAO.
Thank you.
Let's go to item 6.2, staff report on the alternative voting bylaw.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So as noted in this report, our outgoing, so I should say former town clerk had left council with the final report on the special election last year and indicated that there were some lessons learned from things that we would recommend as on the basis of the experience of running the last couple of elections using alternative voting methods. And so our current acting clerk put this report together, essentially saying, here's what we think we should do, to enhance access during the advanced polling period. And there's some justification in there, and we're happy to speak to it. Ultimately, this is a bylaw, so it's not a quick change. The recommendation was going to give first reading to the amendment, and then we'd have a hearing, which I don't think anyone necessarily attended the first hearing we had on the bylaw, but we'll have another one. So if anyone has any questions on the draft, I'm happy to take them. And the crux of the change is expanding the advanced voting period by not having advanced polling days, but just having an advanced polling station here in the building for the whole period.
For the
So
whole thing.
just so anybody at home wondering what we're talking about.
So, are we able to provide first reading this evening?
Yes, yeah, because like a policy gets approved at the meeting after, but this first reading only sets up a hearing 2 meetings from now. So yeah.
I did find it very helpful during that extended, it was a very extended pre-voting or time. So when I did campaign, it was good to see, people came off the list as they voted, and that helps you with your campaigning.
Mhm.
Yeah, by election day, you could easily have half the people on your list having voted.
Yeah.
Mayor, this looks good to me. We
Yes.
didn't change a thing. I move that council provide first reading of the amended alternative voting bylaw.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Carver. You've heard the motion. On the question, all in favor? That motion is carried. Thank you. Change, more change. Let's go to the quarterly update on accessibility.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this is the standard now for all the councils in the county that Ellen, our accessibility coordinator, produces. So it's just provided to kind of give councilors and the public the chance to know what goes on at the accessibility office. And I think she does outstanding work and an amazing amount for one person. We did have, I guess it's worth mentioning, a recent meeting of the Lindbergh County Accessibility Advisory Committee. Town of Mahone Bay super well represented, the only council members in the county there, and there were 2 of them, so pretty good. Anyway, they're starting to review our operational plan, so that quickly realized it was going to take a few more meetings than maybe they had scheduled. But everybody was really excited on the public members on the committee. Feel free to jump in, other folks who were there, but I think they were quite excited to get into looking at something that was practical after such a long period of visioning and putting goals out there. And now we're talking about real improvement. So anyway, if anyone has questions, I'll probably take them back to Ellen unless there's something that
Yeah,
Teddy or I or Francis could
I
answer.
support that certainly. The material that we threw at the committee is so dense that I thought they would all just resign. I mean, because I think that you're right, though. People were happy to see a tangible product of the work. So on we go, one step at a time. It's a lot of work for one person.
Yeah. Sure is.
Okay. There's no action
So
required.
it could be except for information if you.
Yeah.
Yeah, do I just say that? I'm supposed to do. Or I move that we accept the report for information.
Thank you. Seconded by Counselor Now. On the motion to accept for information on the question, all in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you. Let's go to development agreements and plan Mahone Bay progress. Uh-oh, Garth.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, this is a report from Garth, who wanted to be available tonight if anyone has any questions, but essentially what we're trying to resolve here is the day-to-day receipt of development applications, of which we've had several lately, and it's getting to be construction season. We may have more, and our lengthy and, you know, appropriately detailed plan Mahone Bay process. So we don't want either to constrain the other, and this is a suggestion here that planning staff and our solicitor, or Chester's solicitor, who works with our solicitor in the same office but deals with our planning matters on behalf of Chester, would recommend, and I think certainly is a good way to resolve the issue. So the recommendation is included here, is just to accept for information, but what we're planning to do is work with Upland on the basis of the proposed approach, unless there are concerns here. And if council feels this should be discussed in some other format, obviously, you know, we haven't talked to the PAC about this approach. This came from the lawyer to you. But at the same time, it would be good to be able to inform folks who have development agreements in front of the town, and for staff not to spend effort needlessly if we're not going to take this type of approach. So as long as council's comfortable, we wanted to expedite reaching out to those folks who have active agreements and letting them know the plan will be to continue to work on our agreements. So if anyone has any questions, we're happy to take them.
Counselor Gerber.
I just want to clarify, we are being asked for a decision on this tonight.
We're not, I think this is kind of a unique territory of, do we need a decision of council in order to do this? So council could provide direction in this regard, or we could just take this as this would be a normal approach going forward. This can be our standard practice. It's not something that we have any direction to not do. We've just never done it before in anyone's memory. It was 2008 last time. I don't know how the town handled that last time. I'm not actually sure.
Yeah.
If that was, maybe we didn't have any active development agreements in front of them.
Deputy Mayor.
So rationally, the change makes sense. I think process-wise for me, I would appreciate that the PAC gets the same way we refer planning things to the PAC, that the PAC or the steering committee gets a chance to weigh in before we say as council, this is what we're doing.
PAC hasn't seen this document?
No.
No.
So that's one of the things that would be in order is
Yeah.
refer to PAC, and there's just enough time. We found out last month, that's from the PAC meeting to the first meeting of council on the 13th of June. So
Okay.
this would be back, if PAC recommended this, would be back to council 13th of June. Between now and then, we'd essentially just have to kind of take the approach that the work of the planners is, you know, at risk on these things. Like if presumably we don't do this, they won't sink more time into something.
Counselor Gerber.
I had 3 questions, 4 actually. How do you prevent a rush of applications at the end of, you know, as we're getting closer to the approval of the plan? What's the ability of the staff to actually comply with a 1-year period, cutoff period? Because it suggests to me that you're going to have a bunch of stuff to work on within that 1 year. Especially if an application comes in like a month before, it gives you less time. And what have other communities done when they, you know, changed their municipal planning strategy or their land use bylaws? And surely there must be other examples other than us in 2008.
Yeah, so these are questions that Gareth might want to jump in on. The only thing I'll say off the top of it is, you know, I don't believe that there's a lot in our current bylaw that would encourage people to want to get in under the current bylaw structure. But my take anyway, based on the applications we're getting, is that they would all be better advanced under the new bylaw. It's just that they want to get them in now. Yeah, so I think it's probably just things that will be timely, will come forward, would have come forward, but Gareth, please jump in if you want to.
Yeah, so the first question on the rush of applications, I'm not sure that there really is anything we can do to prevent that. It's similar things happen with provincial legislation when you hear about the Coastal Protection Act and everybody's building on the coast as soon as they can. Yeah. So there's some element of that. We do have a bit of protection in that when council gets to the point of giving first reading to the new documents, that does put a freeze on issuing development
Oh,
permits.
it does, okay.
Yeah, and that is where we would have ended up with this had we not
Mhm.
addressed it tonight. So if we do get those applications beforehand, under this proposed approach, we would be able to continue to consider them for up to a year if that's the way the language is in the documents. But yeah, there'd be nothing up until the point of first reading. And this was part of the discussion with internally as well, was if an application for a development agreement or a land use bylaw amendment is consistent with the current NPS, council really is obligated to, at the minimum, consider that application. It shouldn't really just reject it outright. That would open us up to appeal right off the bat. And so that was the potential quandary we were finding ourselves in. Well, what would happen if we continue to get applications? And so then, as Dylan mentioned, through a discussion with our solicitor, it was suggested that there could be language put in to say anything that's applied prior to the change would be considered for a period of time against the previous documents. So what we would do as applications come in now is we would basically be advising people that that's the situation you'd be under. And it would be their choice, like in the case of Saltbox, which was what prompted this discussion. If, to Dylan's point, if Saltbox saw the draft document and thought it was advantageous, they could certainly wait and apply under the new plan, or they could choose to apply now and be subject to the but the one thing that we would make clear is if you apply now, you don't get any of the benefits of the new plan. That, you know, we can only administer off one document, one set of documents or the other. You can't kind of split it down the middle. In terms of the 1 year period, there is some uncertainty there. From a staff level, I think we would do, everything within our power, if we did have an exceptional number to get through them. But there is always the risk with a development agreement that the applicant won't supply the information that we need within that time. And there's nothing we can do about that. And again, that's why it would be important to have that timeline of a year or whatever the time frame would be, to prevent a situation where somebody, whether it was intentional or not, drug something out so that 4 years after the new plan's in place, we're still administering to this old plan, which would obviously create that, would be the best case. In terms of what other communities have done, I haven't looked at this extensively. My previous understanding was that there really wasn't a good way to get around this. So this solution that we have, I think, is a good one. When I reached out to Ian with Uplands just to ask him what his thoughts on it were and whether he'd seen it, he said he was familiar with it. Apparently, there's something in one of the downtown Halifax plans, and again, development agreements, particularly there, can take several years, and so they apparently do have some language similar to this. So, but as an example, in Chester in 2020, when we adopted our new plan, we actually got to the point where we had a development agreement and the new documents were ready, and we had to delay adopting the new documents for a short period of time because we didn't want to shut down that development agreement that was just about ready to be
And you
continued.
may not have had any right to stop it.
Right, exactly. So, I suspect most places may not have any language, and then maybe some of the newer plans are starting to do something similar to this, but
Great, thank you.
Just to clarify that the element of when the first reading is done, whatever development agreement or development permit issued has to comply with both.
well, yeah. So that would be, and that's the same for any like when first reading would be done. It actually ties to the development permit, so the development officer can't issue a permit that's not in compliance with the new whatever the new documents are. Now, this provision that we're talking about adding, and this would have to be worked out, through the legal, would somehow get around that, because you would still be able to approve that previous agreement. How exactly that would work, whether you still wouldn't be able to issue the permit for a short period, for that period of time, and then you, I'm not exactly sure. It's a good question. That's something that when between the consultant and the legal review, we want to make sure that those two clauses worked together and one didn't override or interfere inadvertently with
It's
the other.
possible that we'd have applications active and then not be able to move anything forward for a hearing.
Right.
Until after the next reading.
Potentially, yeah.
But I don't think that's, hopefully, first reading, the second reading isn't a huge window.
Right.
Hopefully.
Hopefully.
Is there anything we can do to mitigate that so that we're not caught in this limbo? This plan has been it's taken quite
So,
some time.
yeah,
to
why?
flesh out. So it would be disappointing if we get to a place where something like that ties us down. So
Right, yeah, so we can, I can definitely kind of check on that specific instance and say, if a current development agreement just happened to be ready to get its permit right at the point that we were in this first reading window, would there be a complication there, or is there a way to get around that? Absolutely.
yes.
Mayor,
Can I move to forward this to PSC?
You can move whatever you want.
Motion move that council that direct staff to forward this report to the PSC for consideration at the next meeting.
Second that.
Okay. You've heard the motion. On the question, all in favor? Motion's carried.
Mayor, I wonder in respect to, regards to valuable time, if it might be appropriate to move item 8.3 up now. In case there's any questions that may come up for the planner,
Okay.
just so we can go home at a reasonable hour. Fair enough? Are we okay with that?
Yes,
Yep.
Okay.
Gareth, are you?
This is just the
Yeah,
Main
the
Street property.
PSC report, yeah, so I hadn't planned to.
You don't
speak on
have
this,
to speak to it.
But I'm certainly, yeah,
I just wanted to make sure you were.
yeah, no, I had time to stick around, so no, I appreciate that.
The item is the receipt of the
Yes.
PSC minutes, so if we're moving to it, Deputy Mayor, do
Yeah.
you want to speak to the PSC minutes?
Yeah, so basically we had a PSC meeting to talk about a recommendation that we provide fast reading to amending the development agreement for 9 and 5 Main Street, and that we set a date for public hearing. So I'd like to move that we accept that recommendation of the Planning Advisory Committee.
I'll
Okay. Second that, Councilor Owens-Croft. On the question,
And I'll just quickly note, another question. Oh, sorry.
Councilor Carver, did you have a question?
I don't, no, thank you.
Okay.
I just wanted to note that the hearing date would presumably be the 13th of June. That's our next available hearing date. We haven't, Kelly, I'm wondering, we haven't used it for any bylaws that have come up. They haven't been given first reading yet, so. Yeah, okay, so right now that's available, ahead of our council meeting on the 13th. And then maybe alternative voting will go to the following one. So I just wanted to clarify that timeline in case anyone has any
Okay.
concerns about that.
All right. Anything else? On the question, all in favor? Motion's carried.
Yeah, so I hope Joe will now be at peace that this thing is.
Well, I'm glad,
moved
right?
along.
Yeah, no, that's great.
Oh, yeah, I guess as a bit of a clarifier, so we did officially confirm that when this happens, it will affect the timeline on the previous motion.
Okay,
Discharge technically isn't still in place because we have a new agreement.
fair enough.
I mean, also hopefully they'll bill.
Yes.
But just so that you know,
Well-
we'll also remove the previous.
On an aside, I thought that the note was well crafted and it clearly identified that the shoreline protection zone is adjacent. And I think the way that was articulated was just subtle enough to let you know that there's a window, and then when the window closes, and your next door neighbor probably won't have the same opportunity. So strike where the iron is hot. So I thought I was very gratified to see how well that was crafted.
Okay. Let's go to 6.5.
Thanks.
Thank you, Gareth.
Thank you very much.
6.5.
So this one, also, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this is a report on the response to a letter received from Ms. Barry Dupuis. This was a direction from council to prepare a response letter. And I guess the planning staff, not Garth, but our development officer Heather, did also review this response. And so this is my recommendation that we, per the previous motion, do now approve by motion that we send this response. If anyone has any questions, I'll take them.
Councillor Kerr.
Thank you. I had suggested the possibility of including a reminder that for any further questions, that Mr. Dupuis is free to contact the development officer for clarification. I just didn't have a sense. I thought that might help to add that.
Well, I guess it could always just be done as amended, and then if everyone was in agreement to that, I mean, this, it's always hard to add to the letter. You know, the letter's been presented, but I think that's a straightforward change if you were to say that, everyone would know what you meant.
Yeah, just to add to that. I think-
Gonna make it complicated.
Yeah, I'm
Kelly,
gonna-
are you ready with that?
not too complicated. But so what I think probably we need to remind, or not remind, but just point out that we're doing the municipal planning strategy review and land use bylaw changes, and there's a public here, is it a public information session? May
Tomorrow. Probably we'll get this letter sent in the mornings. You might see.
It's only been 2 years in the making.
yes,
There will be another one in June. It's not like that's the only opportunity.
that they can build themselves to suggest or make suggestions to that process if there are things that they feel we need to capture in the municipal planning strategy.
I think it fits reasonably with the letter. Again, if councilors are supportive, we could probably do as amended to reflect.
Just to clarify, so in this case, you've got a development that's by right. That not only is the owner allowed to do what they've done, but there is no obligation to let council notify town council or town staff to that effect. And my sense of things is that if someone made an inquiry to the development officer would say, you know, sorry, I can't comment on an individual owner's rights and privileges. So I'm just wondering if directing them to the development officer does that actually resolve the issue, or will they just meet a brick wall based on the privacy concerns that we chatted about at the last meeting?
I mean, if I can answer, it always does depend on the nature of the questions. I know in this case, our development officer has answered a lot of questions from this particular individual, but there are questions she also hasn't answered to his satisfaction for the reasons you're describing. And he has spoken directly with the developer who can disclose that information. So that is usually the wall you hit, is you probably should just talk directly with the person in
With the
question.
owner.
They own their information and they can share it.
Right.
And then so usually that is the resolution, and I think it hopefully has been here. But
Mhm.
yeah, there is a point where we can't go further, and it can be frustrating for people, but at the same time, she's still the right person to talk to. So I don't think it's harmful.
Mhm. Fair enough.
So I'm just trying to understand what the development officer can disclose or not. But sure, I would hope that if somebody asks a question like, how does this construction fit with the architectural control zone? Surely she could answer that question.
I mean, usually the question is just that we can answer is, does it?
Does
You know,
it?
that would be, you know, but the bigger thing we're talking about here is that most of the discussion is about the proposed development. But we only have a permit issued for a small part of what is understood to be planned. And really, anything the developer has disclosed about their intentions, other than what they've actually applied for, is not something we can disclose. So that's really the biggest area that people get into. Why can't you tell me more about? Well, it's just not.
But the development officer could say, the land use bylaw says X, Y, Z about the roof lines and about.
These are this is what we use
These
as
are the
the criteria
requirements,
to
yeah.
say, yes,
Yeah.
this is conforming. Yeah, that part, and I believe she has in this case, yeah.
Well, the reality is that sometimes people will not get satisfied with it.
Yeah.
It's not the answer they want to hear.
Yes.
No.
You know. Yeah, but yeah, and I think we all agree, homeowners they should have some level of privacy.
Yes.
If their project is based on by right approvals. So I think Deputy Mayor, you made that point last meeting, and I think everybody agreed with you then too.
Okay.
With those edits, though, I think this is fine to go forward if we need it.
Did you get the edits? You could capture those? Okay.
So in terms of mentioning, well, we won't just mention May 10th, we'll say there's another plan.
And
home
share
day
information
coming up.
about the public engagement.
I'm just
process.
noticing the mayor also has to sign it, so the chances of us getting it sent and receiving it before tomorrow night. We can let you know when it's ready anyway, well,
Fair enough.
What do you do?
Pony post.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So do we need a motion to approve the letter?
Yeah.
With the changes as noted? Moved by the deputy mayor, seconded by Councillor Carver. On the question, all in favor? Motion's carried. My work done for tomorrow.
I'm sorry, good, because we'll try to have it ready when you're already gonna be here. You're in and out every day this week for
I
something,
know,
so,
I
yeah.
know. 6.6, tree donation recognition.
Now we're
Thank
talking.
you, Mr. Mayor. So this is just a timely one. We were working on the bench donation rollout and realized this is the time of year we often get a lot of interest in tree donations. We're still struggling with a good way to recognize tree donations, and obviously we should do that. Putting something next to every tree can be a challenge. The things go missing, they get run over by the mowers, and it's like they're just not ideal for long-term recognition. So our thought is to do it centrally. We don't have a prescription. We're thinking maybe the right way to do this is to not be too prescriptive and say like, this is our idea, since we don't design memorials or artwork or, so let's hire someone who would. So the real recommendation here concerns the budget. And then we would hopefully go out and have a public process. But the budget here is recommended as a referral to the capital budget. We're right in the middle of the capital budget process. So we're suggesting a $5,000 budget. And then if you look at the math that acting deputy CEO prepared, I think it's very obvious that there's a rationale to spending up to 1/10 of donations on recognition of the donations. I think that's about as far as you'd want to go, but it's a reasonable amount.
Mayor, we've been talking about this item at the cemetery committee, as you know, over the last year. There've been, some artist renditions and some ideas and about how to kind of centralize that recognition. Really, this is about just not having haphazard little stakes in the ground everywhere with a name here and a name there, but having more one centralized art installation essentially that acts also as the acknowledgement. So I know Kelly's been leading the charge on that and has some great ideas. I think this is a good idea. We should proceed. And I saw Mr. Maxwell had donated some trees this week, so that was nice to see as well.
Yeah. Any other comments?
So are we referring this to the budget?
That's the recommendation. Yeah, I figured it wouldn't make sense to try to approve it on as a standalone where we're in the budget.
So just curious, what, very, very green, on this. If I make a donation of a bench in a park, I'll see the plaque on the bench itself.
Mhm.
So if I make a donation of a tree or trees, and I don't see it on the tree itself, will that be an issue for the folks who are donating?
I think that in the conversation we had at the cemetery committee, it was really around the town and public works needing to make decisions about tree placement, tree care, and in collaboration with the Talking Trees and the Homemade Gardening Association, like what species of tree and should it be a flowering tree and does it have fruit and yeah. So I think the short strokes are we happily take the check or the credit at the nursery or what have you, but there are other people that will need to be part of the decision making about all of those other criteria, the what species, where it's going to be located, and how it's going to be cared for, and so on and so forth. So it's really trying to put some rules around we're not doing the 100-year tree, the 100 tree planting all around town. And at this point, we really need to be pretty prescriptive about where the trees would be.
Yeah, I
Okay.
mean, it's kind of two sides, is one is just simply, we've always put the little marker next to the tree, and practically speaking,
They'll go.
that's not a great solution in terms of a last. But the opportunity to identify the location of the tree on this dedication, like that is still there. We could still,
Mhm.
you know, in order to encourage donations, say this is your tree. Because I do think for a lot of people that is meaningful, but that could still be identified on the whatever form of the donation recognition we have.
Yeah.
And it could say, you know, red maple located in Jubilee Park or something along those lines. If we could do something like that.
Yeah, I think
Councillor Carter?
Oh, thank you. Commemorative trees, so I'm just thinking about a plaque or a board, whatever it would look like, and I worry a little bit about design. So I just hope it's gonna be really nice. But in terms of space, you have the name of the donor, and if it's a commemorative tree, then you may want to have space for the name of the person in whose memory it's being planted. So space may be a consideration and planning ahead for that, but maybe that's a discussion for further down the road.
I hope it becomes part of the, you know, competition to give us an art, like.
Yeah.
For example, and again, I'm not an artist, if you can design something where a leaf is displayed for each tree and you can flip it, you have twice the space to be able to put who donated it and where it was donated, so maybe people will get creative with that kind of thing.
And other municipalities have programs like that. I mean, I know in Ottawa, there's for the experimental farm, there's programs like that, and also the city has, and they have a centralized notation of trees.
Any other comments? So we're setting aside $5,000 as it happened in the budget process. Anticipating a donation of 100 trees. Is that what we're?
So the scope would be, we want to pay someone $5,000 to design something that will recognize 100 trees donated, and then we'll add them one at a time as they come in.
Okay,
But the idea with the 100 is just in terms of knowing what the donation value is, and then how much we're willing to spend on the recognition, to not be more than 10% of the donation value.
okay.
It could take 5 years for us to get up to 100 trees. I don't know how quickly it'll go. It might go in 1 year, but regardless, it'll be 1/10 of the value will be used.
And hopefully there'll be a tree by every bench, so there'll be some shade. Okay. You have a motion that's been included. Somebody wants to make it? Councillor Feeney makes it silently. Councillor Wilson seconds it with as much fanfare as Councillor Feeney did. On the question, all in favor? The motion is carried. Thank you. Let's go to existing conditions and concepts report by the WSP.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So as councillors will remember, we were joined by Patrick Hatton from WSP at our budget meeting on the 21st. We presented these in detail. At the time, we said we would need some time to consider and refer it to this meeting. There were a few suggestions made about making requests for estimates of costs, because those were not included. It wasn't within the scope of work here. So if council would like to do that tonight, that might be something we could do, but happy to take questions. Really, we're just looking for a way forward, with respect to the intersection.
Councillor Wilson.
I'll start. As we remember, I'll remember, we discussed in kind of an overview way at the last meeting. And my takeaway from it was of the, I guess, 3.5 possible alternatives. Was it 1, 2, and 2A, and 3, right?
Yeah, it kind of became 5. I think it was.
1 and 2. I could see nothing in those recommendations, or sorry, 2 and 3, I guess, the ones with the stop signs. That would make that intersection maybe safer than it already is. The roundabout, concept is logically the safest of the bunch, also by far the most expensive. And also the most encroaching on people's private property and creating all kinds of other parking and other issues with the church and so on and so forth. So I revert back to where I started this whole process back when the whole idea was actually presented by the CAO, I think a couple of years ago. And that is this a problem worth solving? And I don't see any evidence that there's a problem in that intersection is big enough to warrant us spending a whole pile of money and creating a lot of anguish in the community over. It's been like that for 100 and some years. And I see no reason why it shouldn't be like that for another 50.
Thank you. Councillor.
So I'll weigh in, and this won't be any surprise to anybody around the table. I mean, going into the last election, I think that the third item on my plank was to advocate for maintaining the cenotaph in its current position. I guess I was gratified to hear that the planner and the engineer indicated that there is no real significant history of collisions or traffic or damages or RCMP writing tickets. But I do think that this is a project that doesn't have legs, doesn't have community support. It's not financially easy to proceed with. There's a lot of, it would really tear up the town for an entire summer. And I think this is far down the priority list. And in fact is something that I think the only one of the scenarios that has any viability would be the traffic circle, in my opinion. And that requires the elimination of 10 parking spots, expropriation of people's property, and a lot of other pain and suffering. So I would like just to shelve this, put it next to the other project that we didn't proceed with.
Okay, thank you.
I have to voice that I don't know why we're doing this again. I've lived in this town for almost 64 years. And it has come up over and over again. And it just seems to become an emotional item with constituents of the town. I think parking is a bigger ordeal for this town, and I'd rather us see ways of maybe purchasing some of the land that is coming available is available right now in the center of town. We've got the Masonic Lodge area. We have behind the post office area that may be a possibility for public parking space that we would be a better use of our money and for the safety of people in our town. So I think that's something where I would rather see, if we were to spend this amount of money, we wouldn't even have to probably pay this much amount of money, but I would like to see us address the issues of parking in the town.
Okay. Councillor now.
Just gonna be really reiterating what, I've lived here all my life, and as the traffic has already shown, there's been in the last 3 years, but 2 very minor collisions, which to me looked like it was all driver instigated rather than the roadway instituted. So I have to agree, why are we even going through this process? If the citizens purely don't want it, I don't think it's needed, because it doesn't seem to be inhibiting anything. So why are we even going through this process? And I don't think we should be spending any more money on it.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
So,
Go ahead. I'm just counting.
you'll probably be surprised that I disagree with some of the stuff that you folks have said around safety and around why something needs to be done there. I've been at a couple, at least 2 or 3 PABs where that a concern has been raised. And for me, I think the reality is, yes, it's an emotive issue with the cenotaph being where it is and it potentially being moved. But this is one of those things where you don't have to wait for a death or an accident for you to do something, and we can do something. I know from the reading the room, this is not something that will go forward, so I won't put my energies in it. But I'd want you to think about it from a perspective of, don't wait for a disaster for you to do something. And we've been warned a few times. Yes, there's not been any fatalities, but I would say, as somebody who's come from away and struggled to drive there so many times, it's a disaster waiting to happen. And I wouldn't want us to wear that as council, that we were told about it, we did not do anything, and something happened. So it's a dangerous intersection in many ways. Probably because you've lived here for quite a long time, you don't see it that way. But for folks who don't, and who don't come here a lot, it's something that constantly comes up. How do you folks navigate that intersection? It's something that we seriously need to think about. I think the traffic authority is trying to give us some advice as to what we can do. He's provided what we can do. We should think about it more critically than just say, well, that's not money we need to spend, or we don't want to engage in that particular difficult conversation. We were elected to have those very difficult conversations, and I think we need to have that at some point.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Trevor.
Excuse me. I know somebody who was hit at that intersection and had a severe concussion. This was maybe a decade and a half ago. And I personally have had several close calls at that intersection. Even so, I don't have any appetite for any of these changes at this time. We have the information. We can come back to it later. We're going to be having one end of Mahone Bay Main Street dug up next year for water pipes and so on. I think we need to give the town a break in terms of the construction projects. And I think we'll get to it. We'll find a resolution at some point, but I don't think that now is the time. But I agree, there are dangerous aspects to it. I would also, as well as parking, like to see some way of addressing the crazy situation on Central Main Street, where cars always drive half their width and sometimes their whole width in the other lane across a solid yellow line. I mean, that is dangerous. Literally, I mean, I think I sent you an email after the time I was driving along the road and suddenly I was head on to a huge transport truck.
Yeah.
He felt they had the right of way.
And he was on your side of the
Oh,
road?
yeah, yeah, I was in my lane, kept on coming.
Mr. Traffic Authority.
Thank you. So to the deputy mayor's comments, obviously it's council's decision whether to spend money on something, and I appreciate council having agreed to get the engineering analysis done. If we don't move ahead with anything, I will submit a letter to traffic authority just indicating that I have raised this concern. I strongly feel that there is something with that intersection, which I think we all know is the crossing across oncoming traffic lanes with the yield is it's not a standard thing, not recommended. So I want to go on record about that, but it will be council's decision, of course, either way. I just want to note that I will go on record in order to make it clear that the traffic authority did not say it was okay to do nothing in this case, but that's council's prerogative. Just as far as, digging it up, spending a lot of money, why would we do this now? People need a break. I just wanted to emphasize that we have in our own long-term plan now, probably talking 2026, 27, I guess, depending on next federal election, when we next get a crack at the cost sharing, three-way cost sharing with respect to underground services. Likely, we would intend to continue the upgrade of underground services on Main Street. So probably in the next 5 years, council will be confronting digging up the intersection anyway. And I guess I would just encourage that perhaps it's worth investigating the property conflicts that were raised, the possible property issues around the roundabout now or in the next 5 years that might prepare us to better move on something at a time when it is considered timely. So that's just a bit of advice in terms of not getting caught trying to do something that is going to take quite a bit of effort if maybe we could explore further at this time, but that's council's prerogative. So I mostly wanted to note that I, have raised the concern. I do strongly believe there is something wrong with the intersection, but it's council's decision, obviously.
Okay. Anyone else? Councillor Carter?
Are there things that we can do in the meantime, little tweaks to make it safer? And going back to Councillor Wilson's comments last time that he had suggested a yield marking, but they ended up putting it in the lane, not the one that he intended, if I got that right.
Do you want to reiterate what your suggestion was? Just.
Well, I was just, when we originally put the most recent yield sign, which is the yield sign for people turning left onto Edgewater Street. The original discussion was really to have that yield sign for the people turning right off Main Street on Edgewater Street over by Northern Sun, for them to yield. Because although it's legally in the correct place, it's logically not in the correct place. But, I've talked to a lot of people about this intersection in the last couple of weeks, like I'm sure we all have, and a lot of them say, well, the simple solution or a simple solution to make it safer would be to change all of the yield signs to stop signs without any other physical changes and just make it a three-way stop. And maybe, something like that would work better. I don't know. I don't disagree that it's a problem, but I think we also have to remember it's quite entertaining.
It's quite a what? Entertaining.
So I do think that if staff feels compelled to craft a note to the council, based on, I'm assuming some expectation that the letter will shield you from a potential liability, then council will have to entertain that, and then we'll have to understand exactly what the town's liability is. There are traffic signs. We have asked the province to reduce the speed to 30 kilometers. The province has denied that request on multiple occasions. We've communicated that to the community. And, so I do think there's context for the decision-making of council along Main Street, traffic calming actions that we've taken, some of which have already been discussed tonight with the fire department. I mean, so we have a T at Main Street and Pleasant being proposed. We have a three-way stop we've introduced up the street. I mean, I think this council has done quite a bit on traffic calming and transportation activities in the last 4 years. So, but I wouldn't want to confuse that with saying that spending millions of dollars on building a roundabout, eliminating 12 to 15 feet of someone's front lawn on their property, eliminating 12 parking spots under the auspices of improving safety is logical. I mean, we know from the study that we just received that the safest of the three options is the roundabout, which is similar to what's in place now. So, I mean, I'm unaware of the provincial Department of Transportation coming down there and writing us a letter saying it must be changed. I'm unaware of any provincial engineer that's come down and said this has to evolve. This is self, if that's the case, that certainly hasn't been articulated to council or the community at large. So, I mean, I think we'll wait patiently for this. And if there are any other decisions the council makes that staff has an opinion on that they disagree with, like they can send us letters to that effect as well. I'm not sure it's helpful. I don't think it is helpful, but we'll certainly receive them in the spirit that they're intended.
CAO?
Thank you. So certainly this comment has nothing to do with council's otherwise great efforts in terms of traffic calming. As traffic authority, I've been very pleased by council's willingness to action concerns from residents, obviously. But as you say, I have raised the concern as traffic authority. I think it's important to put it on record. And since many council members said tonight, I have no idea why we're talking about this. I think we do have an idea, and I think I need to articulate that again on the record. As to the question about why the province is involved, we are very happy most of the time that the province has delegated to us the role of local traffic authority. It allows us to do things like deciding to add a stop on Clearway in Maine. the flip side of that is they've delegated to us the role of traffic authority, so they are no longer playing the role of traffic authority in our town. And having delegated that to us, they've also passed liability to us to do due diligence in that respect. So we actually have had, since I've been here, on several occasions, people in our community contact the province to voice concerns about that intersection. They have been referred to us with a note saying, this is for you, this is not our jurisdiction. So I just wanted to clarify, the province actually doesn't take any jurisdictional interest in what we're doing here. It is our responsibility. So that's why they're not coming and saying, you have to do anything.
Is there any possibility that we can get an opinion, a legal opinion on the liability issue for the town by not taking any action to address that situation?
I'll have to look into that and get back to you. I'm not sure how we would requisition that, but there may be something.
But if the province is not the accountable authority, they've given that authority to you, and it's a decision for council to make, somebody should be able to say, but if you make that decision, here's what can happen.
I think the nature of the law is that only precedent can serve as an indication of what could happen. So
Okay,
what we'd effectively be asking for from our lawyer is, could you look back on precedent and tell us what, in similar situations, when an accident has happened and it later has been found that such an issue was known and ignored, was there any claim and liability towards the municipality? So that may be able to be assessed. How similar the situations that have legally been tested are, I'm sure there's a wide variety that would, any judge would obviously have to take into account. I mean, I think that's the issue with that type of question, legally speaking, is they can only look at the most similar circumstances that are precedented. But I'll check with our solicitor.
I think it's a difficult question for council to consider if you don't know the ramifications of your decision. Deputy Mayor, and then Councillor Fee.
So, I mean, I think based on the conversation today and what folks have said, I don't think we need to spend much more time on this. It's been bandied around for quite a long
We just
time.
keep going around.
Just keep going around it. I think in many ways a decision has been made based on the sentiments here. I think if we're comfortable that that's the, I'm not comfortable it's the best decision, but if we're but it's a group making process. If as a group we're comfortable that we shall this report and pray to God that nothing serious happens there. So be it, rather than keep bringing it back and sending staff to go look for another angle that we can look at it from. I don't get the sense that the will is there to actually do something in this regard, and so let's not spin our wheel into.
Nothing?
I'm finer.
Okay,
Just quickly on that, when we get back around to the budget, maybe someone can ask for removal of, because it is
Because it
currently,
is in the
yeah,
budget,
so, but that's council's prerogative. That would complete it not coming up again process.
Yeah.
should we have a motion now to forego?
Oh, yeah, hey, you can do that, yeah,
Yeah.
you can do it this way. So this would be a motion to revise the draft budget to remove construction on the intersection. So that would be in order tonight, if you want to do it tonight. We won't be revising the budget until after Thursday anyway.
Want the honor?
So
Okay, seconded?
I have a question.
Yep.
How much is on the line for the construction? Okay.
How much was budgeted, or I think it was about 100,000. Yeah.
That's the plan. That's just.
We it was
That was
definitely
just
not
the
a plan.
Let's add a zero.
Really with no idea of what the possibility. But we obviously wouldn't go ahead, like there was an option in the contract that we have to go ahead further with a design.
Yeah.
But we won't do that if this motion that's been proposed.
We're between a rock and a hard place or something like that.
So if you vote in favor of the motion to remove the item from the budget, is that tacit approval to take the issue off the table.
Yes.
I think so.
So if you don't vote for removing it from the budget, you are continuing to support the notion that something needs to be done in that spot.
I mean, we don't provide reasons, but that could be. the
No,
motive.
yeah, okay.
it Could be the
Okay,
case.
so then I have another question. So by leaving the money in the budget, it's kind of a placeholder. I mean, is that an option?
Big
too?
placeholder.
Big placeholder. Or we just move it along the capital budget line?
Well, like I
2 years
said,
from now.
in 5 years' time, that
Yeah.
intersection will come up just simply because we're digging it up anyway, whether we
Yeah,
change a
right.
thing or not.
Yeah,
But yeah, otherwise it wouldn't come back up.
so we all know it's gonna come up again.
And consider the population growth that we planned for 2050 and what it's going to look like then. However, we had a motion on the floor. You've heard the motion on the question. All in favor? Opposed? So it's 5-2. Okay, let's go to council items. Representative volunteer. Always an interesting process. And it's something that we don't do enough of, I don't think. And that's to recognize all the different volunteers that really make the town work. Make the flowers grow, make the trees grow, make the grass grow at the soccer field. I mean, there's no end of the things that volunteers do for all of us. And we do once a year, in conjunction with the provincial initiative, select one person to be our representative volunteer from the town. Someone who embodies that notion of volunteering. And when their work is singularly but collectively important to the life of the town. And I'm very pleased to announce that the representative volunteer for this year is Karen Vincent. So congratulations to Karen on being identified by council as a representative volunteer. And congratulations to us for having someone like Karen living in our town. You know, in her case in particular, it seems like every time something comes up, from the reindeer run to whatever, Father Christmas, all those, Karen's right in the middle of it.
And Dave comes along with it.
Then you get Dave as an also ran. So anyway, there will be a process in conjunction with the province. Are we back to going into Halifax for the dinner with the lieutenant governor?
My understanding, I'll forward you the information, and I believe it's, I know it's in the fall again this year. They've changed their timelines.
Bagpipe playing inside the Westin Hotel.
Nice.
Okay. So, Councillor Feeney, Mahone Bay Community Land Cooperative.
Mayor, I have two motions. We had a presentation, as you know, from the Mahone Bay Community Land Cooperative, specifically talking about the plausibility of converting the fire hall into residential housing. We're contemplating that. We've actually received a letter, a proposal from them to that effect at the end of March, which is still under evaluation. At our last council meeting, representatives requested the council and the town provide support to their application to 2 funding grants from the Nova Scotia Community Housing Growth Fund. The first grant being a capacity building grant, specifically around the ongoing development of the organization as a whole. The second grant being one for planning and pre-development that specifically is associated with the fire hall initiative. So I'd move that the council and the town provide that support to the Mahone Bay Community Land Cooperative for the capacity building grant, as well as the planning and pre-development grant.
Okay. That's your motion?
Yes, I was gonna add a please behind it, but I didn't know if someone else would support that. We can break it into two or have it as one, depending on council's will, but I'll leave it as one motion for the time being.
Okay, let's get a sec, see if we can get a seconder, Deputy Mayor. Okay. On the question,
Where does, if we approve the second part of that with regard to the fire hall, where does that leave us as far as progressing with public works or anything else for the fire hall?
Can I just comment that that fire hall piece is not part of the motion as
This
it now
is-
stands.
Okay, well, I thought it was, the second part was for the.
No, so as a deputy mayor, I think clarified this afternoon, which I thought was a good point. We just have to really look what they're asking for. They're looking for a letter of support to seek provincial funding for a grant so that they can proceed with evaluation and due diligence. So this in no way, I think, ties council's hands, as I understand it. That's certainly not the intent of the motion. We'll wait patiently and hopefully these grants get awarded quickly and that work can ensue.
so this is council now in a hold pattern until such time as the province responds one way or the other?
I wouldn't think we are in hold pattern. In my opinion, this is just one around the table, that eventually council will have to make a decision. It's just, we're hoping that the province can respond to the community group. The community group can do their due diligence in order for council to have the full breadth of information we may require.
So the
But at
letter,
some point, we make a decision.
the letter in no way, shape or form is going to be able to be misconstrued that council is approving the initiative. This is just to get funding to find out what the details are.
Yes, that's the intent.
Okay. Deputy Mayor, and then Councillor Carter.
Yeah, responding to the holding pattern piece, I think we are in holding pattern because we've chosen to be in a holding pattern ourselves, right? We've received the expressions of interest, we've received the report from valuation, we've received the report from the property
The real estate.
real estate agents,
Yeah.
but we've not made the decision because we are still waiting to figure out what's the best way forward. So in terms of a holding pattern, I think that's on us. We can decide today to make the call and decide
Yeah, but
what the way forward
I
is.
thought we had responded to a request from the organization.
Yeah.
That's proposing this, that we would give them an opportunity to pursue all of the options that they have to
Yeah,
kind of.
which is the next step I was going to. So they've come back to us and saying, we need some money to be able to actually do the feasibility study. It doesn't mean that council can't make a decision tomorrow
Mhm.
and say, we want to use the old fire hall for X. So council still has that. If during our budget process, we figure out, oh, we really need to make a decision on this, I think council still has that prerogative to do that.
Okay.
What for me, why this is important is that part of the information that should come out of the feasibility study actually helps me in terms of that decision-making process, in terms of what we do with the old fire hall. Within our own processes, we've not invested any money to do that kind of feasibility study. We're getting an opportunity to do it. So for me to add on to the information we already have, so that if we're making the decision as council, it provides us with a full breadth of all the options that are out there. Now, like I said in my email, I think it works very well because it allows us to continue having the setup we have right now. Public Works continuing to use the building.
Mhm.
And I think the cooperative would be quite okay with that being an arrangement, even if whatever decision we decide, they would be okay with that, because in terms of timelines, I don't think as a cooperative, they would be able to even take possession and do any kind of work by the end of this year. Or next one, or next one. So it provides us with a very good balance in terms of eventually, if that's the direction we go, it works out
Yep.
great. If it's not the direction to go, we still have done a feasibility study, but this is something that is either feasible or not.
Councillor Carter. And then
Yes, I support everything that the deputy mayor has said, and I don't think there's any concern about the town being committed in any way. And in fact, I think it might sort of help to include a comment in the text of the letter of support that this is open-ended. We're not committed to, we support it because we all want the information. All of us do. And we know that this is going to be a little bit down the road. We are in a holding pattern right now. And we'll just have more information this way in terms of making our decision in the end. I mean, because they were going to end up that considering, oh, it could be a tax-paying property or a series of properties, as well as addressing our strategic goals of affordable housing and increasing the population. So there's so many things to consider, and I think it's a no-brainer.
Okay, thank you, Counselor. CAO.
Just three related points. I just wanted to mention, council has also directed staff to produce another report. So that's part of the sort of holding that's been described as waiting for that. You have to, but.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then also, typically if they've received the funding and the application wasn't from us, well, they probably will still get to use that funding if.
Yeah.
All of a sudden this, so it's still a boon to the organization. If they get the funding and then they don't get the property, they can probably reuse the funding. They probably won't get it taken back from them. So that's a plus. And then, and then just in terms of like what we actually are, waiting or needing to make a decision of, the main thing that's come to a head in the budget is our expectation that the garage will need to be torn down. That's really more the commitment is that Public Works will have somewhere other than there. And as long as council's clear that if we tear that down, well, they're not going back there.
Yeah.
So that's the only thing that is kind of pushing from a timeline perspective, because demolition on that arguably should happen this fall if we decide we're not going back. But I would be loath to demolish it while we've got the current temporary arrangement until council's
I
committed.
think that point is clear.
Yeah.
Clearly understood by council that the garage is coming down later this summer, if all else, right? This garage.
Will you get our money back on the balls?
I'm sure.
We'll see what we can do.
Okay, anything else on that one?
Okay to proceed to the vote, Mayor? Or no?
Yeah. On the question. All in favor? Motion's carried. Let's go to committee reports. 8.1 Policy and Strategy Committee. The draft minutes of the 24th of April. Councillor Carver.
We're recommending the council amend the council policy to include a public input session within the formal agenda of council and remove the public input session ahead of the regular council meeting.
CAO.
So I wasn't at the policy and strategy meeting. What my understanding was that council wanted the policy with those changes. That's what we presented here. The way that the motion is actually worded, council should probably then defer this, like say, are you gonna vote on the change? Then it goes back to committee, then it comes back to council, but it's within your rights as council to act on it tonight. So that's your choice.
I want to second and make a friendly amendment.
Yeah, please.
I'm sorry, I didn't realize you were actually making a motion.
Well, I was hesitating.
I thought you were just trying to figure out.
Right.
I would like to move that council amend the council policy as discussed at the policy and strategy committee and as captured in this document, right?
So if you want to move forward with the full document there,
Yeah.
the motion should just be that council would adopt the policy as amended.
Yes.
There would be-
Would it be as presented since the amendments are in?
Right, it would be to adopt the amended policy as presented, unless you want to further amend it tonight, and then it would be the amended policy as amended. Thank you, Kelly, even more complicated, but you're right.
I can second that if you.
Yes, I'll make that motion.
Second that.
So may I?
Yes, please.
Yeah, can I, a clarification on what the motion was? Are we still going to have the early one with
No.
the feedback? Or
So-
one session within the,
Agenda.
embedded in the agenda?
Yeah.
That's
With-
what.
Yeah, the motion is for the full policy with all the changes, and there are many,
Okay.
many changes, but that is one change. Moving it into the agenda is part of the change.
But it will be early in the session.
It would be the first item, and
We'll see how it works.
I will note, just for clarity, if anyone's followed the year-long process to get here. We had been asked to contemplate the video recording element. And so I did include, and it's highlighted, related language under recordings, having to do with the possible removal of a section of record. If we don't do it, YouTube will do it. If a comment is made in our meeting that violates YouTube's user agreement, we have to edit the meeting.
Right.
So it would be in our interest to do it anyway, but
Give staff the opportunity to redact
give
something.
the clerk the opportunity to do that in order to ensure that nothing, defined in our policy quite strictly in terms of what would be removed. It's not just don't like hearing. Tonight, for example, everything we heard would have been okay on YouTube. But yeah, so that's just a necessary tweak there, just to make sure that before it was not being recorded, that wasn't an issue.
Mm.
It's good, makes good sense.
So what would the impact be on the public presenter who wanted to comment in that 15-minute piece, which is now part of the agenda, if it's being recorded?
I'm not sure. I can-
I'm wondering if that's going to
Permission to
create
record.
any kind of an issue for people who may not want to stand up in front of council and express an opinion or a position, because it is not going to be available to the public.
Too bad. If they're not willing for the public to hear what they have to say, they shouldn't say.
Ah,
This
okay.
is the public meeting, so whatever somebody comes to us saying it's public. So if they're not
Oh,
willing,
yeah.
if they're not willing for the whole town to hear what they have to say, then there's a problem with what they're saying.
Not in their mind.
I guess we could also acknowledge conversely, there's the opposite possibility. People will be drawn to the opportunity to create a permanent YouTube record.
Yeah, grandstand up.
I would say that's more likely,
That's more
the issue,
likely.
but they're both possible concerns.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if we make our decision,
We gave the old plan 2 years.
Yeah.
We made, there were some pros, there were some cons, and we made edits, and this has challenges. There'll be unintended consequences,
And-
absolutely, and we'll know about those in another couple months, and then
other
we can make some changes again, so. The idea that we perfected this process is probably not reality. Anyway,
okay,
I'll have some fun in the meantime, though.
Yeah, just change is the only constant. Yeah. That's the only thing we've got, so you can always change things if it doesn't.
so we have a motion on the floor to approve the town council policy with the friendly amendment,
Yes,
right? Okay. Councillor Carver, I think you were the original mover. You're okay with that?
yeah.
Okay, on the question. All in favor? Motion's carried.
May I ask a question now that we've passed that policy?
So why would you get to ask?
I know, I should have done
See,
it.
now that it's passed, you'd like to move to rescind.
Adjournment.
That's true.
Do we have to have a vote to adjourn now, or can we just say?
Not the way I read that.
Okay. just-
So I can clarify now, if the business of the meeting is complete, the chair can call the meeting adjourned without a motion. A motion to adjourn is still an option.
Oh,
So if the business of the meeting is not
Mhm.
complete, any member of council may at any point move to adjourn. So if our meeting's going on, it's 1 o'clock in the morning and the chair says, well, we're not done. Somebody could move to adjourn. That's
We haven't
always
got a
been an
clock
option.
in
We've
the-
never used it, but it's always been an option within our policy to make that motion. So just wanted to say we don't have to exhaust the
Good
business.
to know.
The chair can't filibuster everybody into staying here. There is in fact a
Good to know.
a mechanism.
You should have told me this when I joined.
For your end. Well.
Okay.
7:10, just like.
May I ask a question to follow up on that? So
No
can,
filibuster.
no, I'm just wondering, so can you adjourn debate on a topic that's being discussed that you feel we've gone around the table, can,
So that's the process to call for a question on the vote. So that's a separate process. You
Okay.
can't introduce a motion to adjourn on another motion. So you'd have to have finished debate on whatever motion's on the table. And then someone could move to adjourn the meeting, but you can't adjourn the meeting mid.
no, I'm just saying the debate on a topic.
Yeah, there's a
That's
different.
call for the question.
Yeah, it's a different.
Okay.
Okay. Part B, facilities booking policy.
So there's another recommendation there from the committee to adopt the policy as amended. We just need somebody to.
Happy to move that, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Feeney. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Lawrence Cross?
And to the acting clerk's point earlier, this is actually now to adopt as presented. It was amended at the meeting that made the recommendation to here. Now it's.
So you might head around.
You're very correct, Joe. So we've got a motion on the floor.
Yeah.
Yeah, there
Sorry
is.
to interrupt it.
Question on the question? All in favor. Councillor Carver, were you in? Councillor Carver's in favor as well. Thank you. Okay, council policy, facility booking, that's the end of 8.1. Let's go to 8.2, the police advisory board. I just want to check my calendar. I think the RCMP open house session is coming up.
Yes, it is on the 17th.
17th. If you've never been to the RCMP headquarters up in Burnside, or Dartmouth Industrial Park, or whatever they call it now, it's worth it to go up and have a look. It is quite an impressive,
From 4 to 8 on the 17th.
yes, it's an impressive bit of activity up there. Anyway. Questions on the PAB?
And that may continue with what you said, it's no longer the tour they were planning to give just our group.
No, we can arrange for something.
Right.
And they include their training facility, which is like a big apartment style building, and literally go through the door, there's a picture of a bad guy there, that sort of thing, that they'll give you a tour of that as well. But this is their main,
This is their
Operations
open
building.
house.
yeah,
This is an open house
yeah.
to the public.
So if members of council went to that, it felt like a more in-depth tour would be of interest, then we could arrange that. Councillor Carver.
Well, I have 3 questions, and I've asked this one before. The SOT.
The ticket.
Just a ticket, what's the
Summary offense ticket.
summary offense ticket? What's an example of a summary offense ticket?
Speeding tickets.
So yeah, parking tickets would be a good example. So summary offense ticket is a ticket under bylaw that's been registered through the province, basically.
So that's what Al gives it.
Okay, so that's my next question, which is parking. Who's responsible for enforcing parking? Bylaw, the RCMP or the?
We don't have a parking bylaw. Both the RCMP and the bylaw officer can enforce the provincial legislation.
Both can,
Yeah.
okay.
Parking. too
And
close.
generally, the RCMP does only when they notice someone parked in a obviously dangerous fashion. So they're not going around checking on parking. But if somebody's blocking an entrance, for example, like parked in front of a road or something like that, they'll stop and they have authority.
The parking infractions that are reflected in the Motor Vehicle Act in particular, so.
Okay.
Yeah, they wouldn't do
Handicapped and parking to corners.
Okay.
Not that we have time infractions, they wouldn't do time infractions, they wouldn't even.
They wouldn't do time, okay,
Yeah,
but
we
the
don't.
bylaw officer might.
If we have time infractions, the
Yeah,
bylaw.
if we have time infractions, okay.
It'd be a very, very few. I guess there's a few 20-minute, there's a couple, but very few.
And on their list of activities in Mountain Bay or their list of activities, they say assistance to GP. What is GP? Does anybody know?
General practitioner. You could, sometimes some doctors'
It could be,
offices
yeah.
do have to call in the RCMP with
See that?
some issues.
What page is that?
Zero.
So I've been having trouble scrolling here. It's under number,
It's under the
under number
report.
5, calls for service. There's no paginations.
Yeah, there isn't. Yeah, I've seen that.
There's 15 in the Lunenburg district, but 0 in Mountain Bay, whatever it is.
Just trying to comment, always welcome to come to PAB.
Okay,
Well, often in the emergency room, they have to call the RCMP.
And when a reenactment of those 2 balls of wine that got stolen from the liquor store in the note.
perhaps acting clerk can contact the RCMP tomorrow and find out what GP needs in that context.
Yeah, that's
And there was 0 in Mahone Bay, but 15 in the county.
still struggling to find.
Page 3.
Page 3, yeah.
Yeah.
So with no recommendations from PAV, we don't have to linger on the.
Yeah, it's not, yeah.
Oh, yeah, there's.
Okay, we already did 8.3.
Yeah.
The
Well-
PAC piece.
But don't worry about it. Then if Kelly can get us the information, that would help. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. New business,
Yes.
Councillor Carver,
New business.
Climate Environment Committee.
Yes. Have we, okay, so we passed the facilities booking policy, we've done that, and then, okay, we've done all that.
Yeah.
Yes, new business. I sent an email yesterday morning. With some information about climate summit that is being organized or led or facilitated by the Atlantic Infrastructure Management Network. And I wasn't around for the beginning, for the origins of this. And Councillor Wilson and I have both been involved, as have been the CAO and the former deputy CAO and the mayor and our climate environment manager. Mahone Bay has been very heavily represented in this project that is working towards this climate summit to be held at the end of September, which will have one day focused on municipalities or municipal representatives, and a second day which would be dedicated completely to the public, generating awareness and buy-in and commitment about climate issues. So we have been offered the opportunity to select from 4 different topics that the AIM network people will lead in terms of research and facilitating development of a project that would be of interest to the region, the municipalities in the region. And I'm hoping that the CAO will help at some point, or the others who've been involved in these discussions. But the four topics are emergency preparedness and climate emergencies, regional planning for electric vehicles charging stations, regional transportation, and natural asset management. And we've been presented with information about the the benefits of all 4 of these and some of the challenges that they might present. And I was hoping perhaps that we could just do a little straw poll about what strikes you as, and what sort of hits you intellectually and in your heart, and what might be useful in terms of a project that could be developed that would benefit us and the whole region. The first go around at the last meeting of the people who were there, who are all municipal staff except for the dedicated elected officials of this council. So the headline ones were the EV and transportation in that first go around amongst those people. And I'm also saying that only the 3 municipalities out of the 5 in Lunenburg County are involved. No known reason as to why town of Lunenburg and district of Chester are not involved to date. They might be later on. So there's some interesting things and some mysterious things about this project, but it's happening. It's an opportunity to learn and develop and get on board or have some information and some actually progress on one of these projects. So what would you like to do with this? Do you want to just do a straw poll around the table now? Do you want to defer it to the planning and strategy
You say
committee?
this is gonna be in September, so.
End of September, but the planning has to
Yes,
start.
I know. I was saying, this is May, so I'm just wondering if we could do, I'll take a little more time to study it a little bit, and then do it maybe next meeting or something.
Okay.
But for the Fall Asset Management Conference is in Moncton in September. Let's hope the dates don't, because I would see the same,
Mhm.
some interest from the same people.
They don't,
For both.
because Sam is involved in planning both things. So they
Well,
won't-
that's what I'm saying, and I just hope
They won't
that
get
it doesn't come to that. The municipalities that are engaged, Bridgewater, MODL, and here, are those 3 going to work collectively on one of these topics,
Yeah.
or will there be others joining them on one of these topics?
It's going to be one topic.
Okay, for the,
And I don't know, I don't know the answer to the
Okay.
second part of the question.
Yeah, I think, the thing to add to, and Penny did a great job explaining everything so far, but the FCM funding that is supporting this, right? Why AIM is involved as an FCM grant, and Modal had initially signed on and encouraged us to in Bridgewater, and we agreed to. What they're doing is facilitation services, so they're not coming in and figuring out how to approach these things. They're just supporting the 3 units that have agreed to, and their staff and their council members, to try to come to as it says, an understanding about the way forward, put a plan together, basically take things from just discussion to let's actually try to advance something. And I think in every one of these cases, there are challenges around, are those 3 units the right party to lead this effort? But ultimately what we're trying to do is provoke planning activities. We're not, the scope of this work stops at, can everyone agree? Like with support, with facilitation. If we can't agree on it, it won't move forward. So we're not endorsing it, like if we said we pick transit, we're not endorsing a transit system. We're endorsing a series of meetings aimed at getting the municipalities on the same page on something with respect to transit. That may fail. It's been tried before. So I think that's where we're looking at these 4 topics. It's just like, where's the potential for collaboration? It may still not, amount to anything, but the hope is it will. And I think there is time, but Penny, do you know when the next actual discussion, when they might be wanting to? So looking at my calendar, see if I could find it, but the 1st of June, is that the next?
Summit meeting, the next?
Yeah. Oh, no,
No, it's
the
every 2,
18th.
weeks.
So the one on the 18th, we wouldn't be back in time for, so we just
No.
have to ask. Would the decision have to be made, or the other councils waiting? I don't think anybody else will have had much time by the 18th.
No, they.
So if we say we know we're gonna put it on an upcoming agenda, policy and strategy, for example, we could then say, well, by the 1st, maybe our council will
Okay,
have.
we can do that. If people are happy with that, just put it on.
The mayor
the
brought up
planning
the,
strategy. Oh, sorry.
that's okay. The mayor brought up the AIM conference. Should our asset management committee be involved in this in any way? It is an asset management thing.
I would.
I mean,
hope
as a
that
member
they
of
would all
that, you know, I
be.
didn't know anything about this, so,
Yeah,
you know,
it's just starting to kind of
involved.
happen, although it's been officially announced, registration is open. And accommodation could be booked. for the people.
That's the conference among.
That's what cost.
And that's the one. in
As far as the local conferences, so AM is involved because FCM has started to. The funding that used to be about asset management is now starting to get combined with climate funding.
Yeah.
So basically, AIM has created this model as a not-for-profit of facilitating municipalities to do joint efforts, and
Yeah.
they're now moving into doing it around climate. This particular initiative actually doesn't have very much to do with asset management. Now, it's not to say the committee shouldn't be made aware of it, and maybe tonight we could decide to refer it to the asset management committee just so they're aware of it. But ultimately, if you look at the topics, it really doesn't stray much into existing municipal assets. In our case, the EV chargers one would
Yeah.
somewhat.
Yeah.
We're far ahead of the other units on that one.
Well, there is a natural asset management and.
Yes, and that one.
I mean,
So I think it'd be good to make the committee aware, whether they choose to be more involved, I think we leave up to the committee members, but.
Okay.
So is everybody okay with referring that to the policy and strategy committee at the end?
End of May.
End of
The
May.
four possible topics.
So,
Yeah, sure.
okay, so I'll make that motion that we refer
You
this.
can wait that long. Yeah.
Okay, do we have a seconder for the motion? Okay, on the question,
On the question, I have a question. So what exactly are we being asked for? Yeah.
Um,
Because it's not very clear to me.
Priorities,
Priorities.
which of those four projects would have the most impact for Mahone Bay? That what would we like? to see?
Which one would we support trying to cause a dialogue
Yeah.
between the units in the county about? I guess is the better. Like, we could act on these on our own.
Yes.
This is really about whether there's an opportunity for collaboration. And I
Well-
think that's where natural assets may struggle. MODL, we're quite quick to say, we kind of have our thing we've done and that's what we want to do.
So just like that clarification, because I'm sort of wondering if that's not a decision we can make now.
Yeah.
Rather than send it to policy and strategy. I
Yeah,
know,
sure.
I know what makes sense for us to collaborate on it. And that will change if we go to policy and strategy at the end of the month, so.
Why don't we do a quick straw, why don't we do a canvas right now?
Okay, I withdraw my motion.
right?
I mean,
Okay, so
Maybe
this
that
is
can-
all in the email you sent out earlier
Yeah,
today?
and the attachment has all the projects much more clearly
Just before
spelled
we-
out.
just before we do the canvas, do we have any inkling about what the other municipalities? Seeking collaboration here, do we have any idea what they're? Like, I could live with our choice number two if I know everybody else.
Well, I think
was-
Councilor
was their
Carver was
choice
saying
number
the
one.
issue is only staff from the other units were represented. So we know what the staff felt at the meeting would probably be where their councils would come, but obviously the councilor.
And what's that, Dylan? Are you comfortable sharing that?
But I think Penny has said.
Well, the other part of it was that the staff who were present said that they would check with senior staff. They didn't say they had checked with their councils. So, so hence, we put in the idea of checking with the councils. But the ones that they did say so far were the transportation and the EV charger coordination. And they
Well,
made compelling cases when they spoke to them. They made compelling cases about
in a
that.
perfect world, I would have preferred the natural assets, knowing that we have several of those items on our budget. But and they're always hard to kind of get moved along, but. You know, I certainly could live with those two other priorities if that's where the rest of the county is. Like, it's not like we're gonna push the elephant.
We had a good
Let's go.
conversation with the EV charging where, you know, I was like, we had a good conversation where I was advocating something, but. My concern with EV charging discussion is that I think there's a substantial private sector role
Yeah,
as this moves forward. And where we don't have a regional enterprise network, this might be a good way to have a discussion about the rollout of private EV charging infrastructure with industry. So, so I was trying to the opinion, if we pick the EV one, the real value there, I think, is also in inviting the folks who currently distribute, vehicle energy supply, like Irving in town, and figuring out what their plans are, and whether municipalities could do anything to catalyze that, leading our counties getting the level 3 chargers, but we talked about spending $150,000 to put an EV charger across the street from the Irving, and we all agreed we'd rather see them do it, we sell them energy, they sell it to the customer, so, I think that's the sort of thing that we should be getting into, so I hope the EV, because we've done a substantial rollout of public chargers, we're probably not going to be, we might find a few more locations, but we're probably not going to be doing that as a joint project with the other towns. It's more about the planning activity in 5 years, in 10 years, how do we see, if the province's goals, the federal goals for 1/3 of vehicles on the road being electric vehicles, surely Irving is planning for that, so I think that's what that one looks like, and I think everyone knows transit is, broadly being discussed, but lots of pieces of transit, we're not talking to each other about transit, we're all hearing what Gary's got to say, sorry.
That's okay. Irving has them at a lot of their stations now. Not here, but.
There are increasing numbers.
Look at that, they've got, like the one in All Act, that's got 6, I think, charging stations right there at the Irving.
So in the,
Phase 3 or 2?
I'm not sure.
so in the interest of time, can we just go around the table? And indicate your first and second choices?
I'll go first, public transit. First and second, public transit.
What was the second? Oh, second public transit. Oh. Okay.
I'm with Joe, I think the natural resource piece.
And
That's all.
That's the first
Natural.
one.
Asset management, yeah.
And your second one?
I don't know that I have a second one.
Okay. Anybody else want to jump in?
Transportation
Okay.
and natural assets, number 2.
I would say natural assets first and transportation.
We'll at least have 2 for the.
I'll leave it the same as Richard. But I'd like to make sure that.
Transportation first?
No, natural assets first, but in transportation, but I'd like to empower you to make sure that, there's a handshake to happen with Modal and Bridgewater, feel free to make it. Like wherever you end up,
We're strongly going in one of those.
Yes,
two
like,
lanes.
make sure we're, we want to participate is the
Yeah.
point, right? So if everyone's talking about
Yeah.
EV chargers, we'll participate in that too.
Yeah.
But we just,
We'll participate in whatever, but we just don't have a say in.
We'll make a pitch.
we'll make a pitch, but.
One of the nice things is we'll get to lead on a number of these
That's
things.
right.
We're doing a lot, yeah.
Councillor Lewis,
Natural assets first and transportation second.
and that's exactly what.
Transit, transit, sorry.
But, yeah, and that's exactly what my choice was.
So then that
Natural
becomes
assets
council's
first
choice, I think.
and transit second. So
Sounds like that's the way it
I
is.
have to put the weighting on this.
If we can persuade
It
anyone.
sounded like the natural assets was, they're pretty close, actually, they're pretty close.
And I know Matt's excited to do natural assets if the group can be convinced to, because that's a lot of his background. He's been across the country. He's on the cutting edge as far as that. goes.
Exactly,
Yeah.
well, he made a good case for it because it wouldn't cutting edge, he said there's so little information, it's coming up now, the whole issue of natural assets and the stewardship and the implications for climate, but that there's very little available in terms of the management aspect, so that really sounded interesting.
And we are collaborating on it in one way already with the watershed planning.
Yeah,
That's an example of
Well, and
collaboration on that.
and
That's what we're doing.
the tree and the inventory.
Yeah.
The tree.
Everybody's doing it their own way in
Mhm.
that case.
There's a couple.
Yeah, I think Bridgewater has in the past had an interest in the way we've been approaching the inventory of trees. I think MODL long since decided that they would just do a flyover. They've got so many trees to think about. They don't want to look at.
Leslie,
Right.
thank you everybody for that.
Thank you, Councillor Ferber. I think that concludes our agenda. How many people we have joining us from home?
9.
9. Are there any questions?
Questions?
Shall we wait for 60 seconds
people
to
in the
see if
gallery.
somebody madly scribbles one?
And we have folks in the crowd.
Danny, or folks here in the chamber have a question or comment?
Just for the order of things, I think we would stop the live stream and the recording before.
I don't think so. I think we
No.
give the people online time while these questions are advanced.
Okay.
Well, we would certainly have a lot to say. It's kind of difficult to decide where one would even start at this point. There are a number of issues we would like to address. And we would certainly like some time with each of our councillors and potentially our mayor and co-mayor to sit and discuss these matters in greater detail. We have some big concerns with the proposed parking plan and it only basically honoring waterfront properties. As far as 20 occupancy in restaurants and breweries and cafes. I feel it's very discriminatory basically to businesses such as mine and Betty's. We run Betty's restaurant, this is Betty Hutton and Danielle, I think I know most of you. Collectively, we run 6 businesses here in this town and employ 40 people. And that bylaw, or whatever it is you're proposing, is definitely discriminatory to people on Main West and to anybody on the other side of the street. That takes in Rebecca's, the Nosy Crow, it takes in the Salt Box, it certainly affects Betty's, it affects Eli's, it affects Texas Barbecue, the Ice Cream Shack, and countless businesses. The only 2 that it actually benefits, I think, are Mateus and the Money Anchor. So we would love the opportunity to discuss that further. Secondly, I guess our biggest concern is the proposed noise bylaw by our neighbors to the left of our building. We have been harassed by them for the last 2 years. We have a protection of property order. They have done nothing but try and intimidate and threaten us. We have had multiple altercations between our neighbors and people that have patronized our restaurants. It's gone so far as to screaming at people carrying children. They graffitied a car in what could only be considered a hate crime. They've blocked our driveway. They've threatened my staff, one of which is an 18-year-old transgender kid. Now they have taken to using council and every other single public agency possible to harass us, and somewhere it has to stop. I will affectionately recall a past council meeting where it was blatantly said that they're not doing anything wrong up at Betty's, but if they are, loosely speaking, perhaps we will change bylaw so that they are. And here we sit 6 months later discussing a noise bylaw. So we have an issue with that, obviously, and it's something we, again, would like to discuss further with our members of council. Thirdly, as I was coming in the building, I noted that Ian and Yvonne Cox were coming out of the building, and I'm sure they had some very choice words to say to you at this meeting as well as the last one. I went through all the proper channels to add parking to the right side of my building to have a point of access. The town was involved, Dylan was there, Jonathan was there. We are doing all of the right things, yet I have a very aggressive neighbor who assaulted not only me last week, but one of my staff, and went so far as to pull a stake, a survey pin, which is also illegal and punishable with a $10,000 fine and a 6-month jail term. We have a problem and we have to address it. And it's on both sides for 2 separate reasons, but something needs to be done. I've been to the RCMP multiple times. Everything has been recorded. I have a listing a mile long. I'm not sure what to do about this parking thing. They pulled the stake. Like I said, that's illegal. I was assaulted. We threw a coffee in my face last week. And it's absolutely abhorrent what I am dealing with as far as a neighbor goes. And we're doing nothing wrong.
Just to state the obvious too, within the kitchen and our restaurant isn't it? If it was noisy, there would be no business in it. These people come there, they pay a lot of money to sleep. If it was that noisy, Danielle would be out of business on the inside of her business.
And I surely wouldn't have just bought a second one.
So most of it wasn't questions, but I just wanted to note, and I'm sure you are aware, because I know we talked about it, but the Plan Mahone Bay process right now, the first point you made about parking is pursuant to that. The first of the engagement sessions on the draft plans is tomorrow night at 7 up at the fire station. So for yourselves or anybody watching online who maybe says, you know, this is a great point, I'd like to be involved.
Yeah,
I just wanted to plug this.
difficult, obviously, running a business that, is night operational. It's very difficult for both of us to be out of the restaurant at the same time. And difficult to make meetings like that last for 2 and 3 hours, which is why I'm asking for your time outside of an evening. If we could meet during business hours, I would certainly appreciate it. We would definitely like to contribute to the parking plan, as well would, of course, some other residents that, like the sub blocks and so on, that have businesses on West Main that this affects.
Okay. Anybody there?
No questions.
No questions? All right.
Do we move to closed session there?
Do you have a seconder? All in favor? Motion's carried. We'll take 5 minutes. Thank you, Danielle. Danny.
Be in touch.
We'll take 5 minutes as we go into closed session.